Hi everyone, it's a no neck day for me. It is so cold. It is so cold in Minnesota. But let's talk about Winterkeep. I'm gonna try really hard to keep this review non-spoiler, but it's hard to talk about a sequel in a series without giving some spoilers. Like, there are going to be characters that I'm going to be talking about that are from previous books, so watch this video at your own risk. There is going to be one particular section where I actually give spoilers for this book specifically, but again, I will call that out very boldly when I get to that section. So in this video, I'm going to be doing a review and discussion about Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore. I have a lot of thoughts and they're not all positive, but I really need to kind of get it off my chest a little bit. So first I'm going to give a summary of the plot. So a new continent has been discovered to the east across the sea, and this continent is called Torla. The governments and the monarchies from the continent that we have known from the past are trying to make connections and political relationships with the new continent and the nations on that land. And the closest nation is called Winterkeep. So Winterkeep is a country on the continent of Torla. The plot kicks off with Bitterblue. Bitterblue discovers that some of her ambassadors who have gone to Winterkeep to create these political alliances may have been murdered, and so she starts her journey by trying to go across the ocean to investigate what happened to them. Meanwhile, we're following a new character in Winterkeep named Lovisa. Two heads of the political parties in Winterkeep are married. Like, they're on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but they're married, and Lovisa is their daughter. And Lovisa discovers that her parents might be plotting something. So Lovisa starts to investigate what her parents and the politics in Winterkeep are up to. And of course, Lovisa and Bitterblue will eventually collide. So that is the basic summary of what is going on. This next section, I'm going to talk about the characters that we get. So, first I'll talk about the characters we've seen before, and then I'll talk about some of the new characters. Basically, we have Bitterblue, who I mentioned previously. She is from the previous books, and honestly, in my opinion, she is mostly MIA for a majority of this book. She gets kidnapped really early on in the book, and she doesn't escape until halfway to 3/4 of the way through the book. So she is kind of non-existent. And in my opinion, the only reason Bitterblue is in this book is so she can get married off at the end. Just saying. That's just my opinion, but we do get to see Bitterblue again. And then we have Gideon, who is her advisor. Now, Gideon has shown up also in previous books, and he has a little bit more politicking that he does. He's, more of an ambassador type figure, but again, I don't think his role in this story is as large as the new characters, I will say that. From previous books to this book, Gideon has grown as a person quite a bit. He starts off as an asshole, to be honest. He's not a very nice character. He's kind of abusive in Graceling, and then by Bitterblue he has matured and grown up, and in Winterkeep I feel like he has reached his final form, which is a good thing. However, I don't think he develops at all in this book itself. Like, all of his development happens before Winterkeep. Then we have some new characters. We have the Keeper. We get their perspective. The Keeper is basically a giant telepathic sea creature that's kind of like a kraken, and they have, I think it's a she, so she has point of view chapters. We also have Adventure Fox. Now, Adventure Fox is probably my favorite, to be honest, because it it meets that animal companion sidekick trope that I just love. So he's the perfect balance of cute and fluffy and fun, but he's also manipulative and dastardly, which is, in an animal companion, is kind of my jam. We also have Lovisa, who I have previously mentioned. Lovisa is the daughter of these two powerful political figures, and she's messy. And honestly, I really, really like that about her. She's angry, she's manipulative, she uses sex as a manipulation tactic. However, I will say that this is a little frustrating because Lovisa takes her anger out on the wrong people. And she takes her anger out not on her parents, but on her friends and people who are really trying to help her. So that could be a frustration with Lovisa's character. However, I love following angry, messy teenagers because I think it's accurate, and I like to see how these angry teens grow and evolve and how they overcome these really messy emotions. So that's why I like Lovisa. In my opinion, in this book, she doesn't have enough time to grow. I feel like for the majority of the book, she's just angry, and only at the very end do we see her grow beyond her emotions. Oh, the villain. I won't spoil it. I won't say who the villain is. I'll keep it gender neutral. But the villain is a yikes from me. The villain has a reason for doing the things that they're doing, but it is a really shallow reason. Basically, the villain could get everything that they want by just waiting, but the entirety of the plot happens because the villain was impatient, which is pretty weak in my opinion. So I do not like the villain in this story at all. It's supposed to be a twist villain, and it really wasn't that surprising to me. And as far as villains go, this is a pretty weak villain. Okay, next we're going to talk about themes. And so I like the themes in this book. These are themes that Kristen Cashore has explored in her other works, so it's nothing new here. She's doing it in different ways, which is a good thing. So I'm going to talk about the themes and kind of give you a bare bones description of how the theme is explored, and then whether or not that is successful in my opinion. So the first big theme we have here is toxic, abusive familial relationships and romantic relationships. Now, Kristen Cashore has done wonderful things with these themes in her previous works, but I think she does pull it off decently well in this book. I think exploring this topic is important because there are teens who have abusive and manipulative parents, so just wanted to call that out. So with the familial relationships, I think we see this through Lovisa and her parents. Her parents are physically and emotionally abusive to her, and at the very end of the book, we finally get some resolution to that. So that is a theme. However, I don't think it's super well fleshed out throughout. It's like we get it in the middle and we see a lot of the abuse on page, and then we don't see kind of a resolution for it until the very end of the book. As far as romantic abuse in romantic relationships, we see this through Lovisa as well. Lovisa does not have an understanding of what a healthy sexual, romantic, or friendship type relationship looks like. So I've said this previously, but Lovisa actually uses sex, like the physical act of sex, to manipulate people. And honestly, it's not graphic in the book in any way. This doesn't bother me. I think it's a really interesting thing to explore, and it's not unfamiliar to Kristen Cashore. She has really healthy and interesting discussions around the physical act of sex in Graceling and Fire and Bitterblue and what sex means. And so in this book, we get to see sex used in a negative way, in a manipulative way. So Lovisa does feel bad for what she's doing, but she does it anyway. And she also starts a sexual relationship with her best friend, who is a guy, to relieve stress, which is yikes. However, we do get to see what the consequences of this are towards the end of the book. Like I said about the familial relationships, we get to see on page this abuse of, physical sex, and it isn't until the very end of the book that we kind of see the consequences or the resolution of that. In general, I like reading about characters who do bad things, but it's how the character grows and the execution of that growth and that development that makes it or breaks it for me. So at the end of the book, in my opinion, I don't think this is executed the best. I felt like we got some really cool themes and we got to see some horrible things on page, and then we really quick got some consequences and a plot resolution, but we didn't get to see the resolution for the character and the character arc, in my opinion. Some other themes in this book that I think are really interesting and different from her other works is environmentalism and politics. There is politicking in her other works, but this specific theme has to do with how the environment plays a role in politics and really a critique of the two-party system. Most of other Kristen Cashore's works have some form of monarchy, absolute monarchy, and this is the first time we've seen a republic in this world. This book truly is a critique of the two-party system and how both parties are truly the same. It's just a matter of money, really. And I think it's really interesting to critique that through the lens of environmentalism and what that means for animal rights and fuel restrictions and consumption. This is also for the first time we're seeing like a civilization that's more technologically advanced. So, the monarchies are fairly medieval in their technology. In Fire, we see some advances in medical technology and architecture. So in Winterkeep, they have trains and, different really advanced mining techniques and weapons technology. So this is kind of an interesting thing to explore, and something I really quite enjoyed in Winterkeep was this different aspect of the world and the world building, and using that as a lens to critique the politics and the two-party system. So those are some of the themes that are in this book, and in general, I'd say the themes are executed okay. I think the political and environmental critiques and themes are explored really well, whereas like the relationships and the character stuff, maybe not so much. Next section I want to talk about is the writing. I'll just talk about what the writing is like in this book and the pros and cons of that and what I prefer. So in her previous works, Kristen Cashore writes in third person limited, which is we follow one character, but it is in a third person style. So Bitter Blue does this, Bitter Blue does that. And unlike her previous works, Winterkeep is written in third person, third person, but there are multiple perspectives. So we get perspectives from the telepathic creatures from Bitter Blue, Gideon, Lovisa. So we get a whole slew of perspectives. Now, there are pros and cons to this writing style. So the pros of writing with third person, multiple points of view is we get more world building. We get more insights into the world, into the plot from different angles. At first Lovisa is on one continent and Bitter Blue is on another. So obviously we need at least those two perspectives to see what's happening on their respective continents. However, the cons of having so many perspectives is it can often feel imbalanced or disjointed if executed poorly. It can also, if it's focusing on different characters that you don't enjoy, you want to skip those sections or, speed through those sections just to get to the characters you do enjoy. The other thing about having multiple perspectives is there are tons and tons of threads to weave back together, and this can be, I think, even more challenging when you have multiple perspectives than when you're just following one character and you're focusing on that one character. Now, in my opinion, and for my personal preference, I prefer following one or a limited number of characters and seeing how that character grows and changes throughout the text. So this writing style where we're getting creatures and all of the side characters get points of view, it's not my favorite, so I did not enjoy the writing of this book. We follow so many characters that I think it was a disservice to include so many because it didn't give enough time for any of them to really be fully fleshed out and developed, in my opinion. Now we're going to talk about the romance. And this is the spoiler section. And so I will have a big spoiler warning for this section, and I might even include some of my live reactions, vlog clips of while I was reading it, my reaction to the romance. So here are some reactions I had. I was really rooting for some gay shit, and I really don't want Gideon to get with Bitter Blue by the end of this book. I guess we'll see. But it's not looking good for the gays. And for me, who wanted it to be gay. I don't know, I should just keep reading. I'm not pleased. Gideon does not deserve Bitter Blue. Nope. But I just don't like the two of them getting together, and I feel like that's where this is headed. Like, they'll get back, they'll be in proximity again, and they will immediately confess their love for each other, and everything will be hunky-dory for them. And I'm like, no! Okay, I'm mad. Damn it! I hated the romance. I went into this book thinking and praying and hoping, please don't pair Gideon and Bitter Blue together. Please don't. Please don't. And that is exactly what fucking happens. Here's why I do not like this pairing. I don't think Gideon is an interesting enough character for Bitter Blue. I think Bitter Blue, because we get her perspective so much, she's just a inherently more interesting character. She has developed, we've grown more attached to her. All we have seen of Gideon, besides from this book, are other people's perceptions of him, and he starts out as an asshole. Like, he's not a great character. Yes, he does get better and matures when he gets to be like 30, but I just don't think he's a good pairing for Bitter Blue. He has been a mentor to her since she was 10 years old, and he was 18 or 19. Age gaps in general do not bother me if both characters are older. Yes, in this book, Bitter Blue is 23 and 24, and Gideon is 31 and 32. Normally, that age gap wouldn't bother me. However, it is weird because Gideon has known her since she was a child, and he was a mentor figure for her. And it's so odd to me and awkward that she ends up falling in love with him. Bitter Blue has lots of lovers, and that's great. She talks about how she tries to date people and she hasn't found anyone that she's been in love with, so she breaks up with them after a period of time. So she is trying to date people and find someone that she truly loves. I think that is fantastic to see in fantasy. So why did we need Bitter Blue to end up with someone at the end of this book? In my opinion, Bitter Blue and Gideon's inclusion in this book was not necessary, because the only thing they did truly was, with their inclusion, was so that they could be paired up with each other at the end and married. Bitter Blue does not need to be married. She doesn't need to end up with anyone. This book would have been so much better if the entire romance plot, it's like a main plot, was cut out. If we just got Lovisa's perspective, I think this book would have been fantastic. We could have Bitter Blue in the story, but don't give her a perspective, because she really is more of a prop to the plot of this book than an active player. Like I said, she's kidnapped for a good chunk of it. So if we had just gotten Lovisa, I think that would have been so much more interesting, because Lovisa is, like I said, super messy. So we would have had time to see her be angry, messy, upset, angsty. And then we could have seen her, uncovering plot stuff and then growing as a character and fully fleshing her out without the intrusion of this contrived romance that does not need to happen. I'm going off script here. I'm getting worked up, but this was so disappointing to me, because this is exactly where I did not want this book to go. So I'm just really disappointed with this book in general. I thought the plot is okay, but the villain is horrible. The Kraken, there's a Deus Ex Machina type ending. The romance is trash, and none of the characters get enough page time to fully develop and grow them, is kind of my overall opinion here. I would have such preferred if this was just Lovisa's perspective, because she was a really interesting character, but I think Kristen Cashore did a disservice to her by kind of shoehorning in all of these other perspectives and these other types of story and kind of smushing it all together, which I don't think it worked out well. This one was just kind of a mess, in my opinion. Like, while I was reading the book, I was like, I am not enjoying my time. This is a 2-star read. Was really not enjoying it. The last 100 pages kind of made up for it a little bit. There are some emotional moments. I've kind of hinted at this throughout, but the last 100 pages actually has some emotional weight to it. But it is only until the last 100 pages that we get any sort of character growth, which is why it's my favorite part of the book. But if the first 450, 500 pages of your book is boring or devoid of any sort of character development, is it worth it just to read the last 100 pages? This was a 2-star read for me until the very end, and maybe it brought it up to a 2.5 star, but still, I don't know if that makes it worth it for you or not. The reason I love Kristen Cashore so much is that she does tackle some really difficult topics and executes them very, very well, in my opinion, but I think she just missed the mark with Winterkeep. This is the first new book we've gotten from her in many, many years, and it was a big disappointment for me. Now that I've gotten it out of my system, I hope I'm not yelling at the camera too much. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking about it. So thank you so much for watching. Leave comments down below, subscribe, do the YouTube thing. I'll see you later. Bye.